laughing so hard my stomach hurts. Dan and his mother continued to look down on my parents. They assumed they had low education or plain looks. I was so frustrated, clenching my teeth listening to their comments. They were too rude to my parents and me. I couldn't stand it anymore. I quietly sent a message to my father when Dan and his mother weren't looking. "I need you to come now." I sent him the map of Dan's family home along with the message. The map was given to me by Dan for today's visit. Today was supposed to be my father's day off. He must be relaxing at home by now. Luckily, my father replied within a minute. "I'm on my way." Seeing my father's message, I felt relieved. Then, I excused myself to Dan and his mother. "I'm feeling a bit unwell, so I'll get some fresh air outside." I couldn't bear to listen to Dan and the others' insults any longer. I decided to wait outside quietly until my father arrived. "Oh, is that so? Then, Dan, let's continue our coffee leisurely." His mother was pleased to be alone with Dan. "Emily, don't you run away." Dan's vulgar laughter echoed. I left the seat and waited for my father's arrival. 10 minutes later. My father appeared, wearing dark sunglasses. "Emily, what's the matter? Today was supposed to be the day you visit your fiancé's family, wasn't it? I was surprised when you suddenly called." My father asked me with a puzzled look. "Dad, I'm so frustrated." Seeing my father's face, I felt relieved and started to cry. I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. "What happened, Emily?" My father started to panic seeing me cry. I explained everything to my father. How Dan's attitude changed after our engagement. And how he and his mother looked down on me together. "I can't stand them looking down on you without knowing anything." I couldn't stop crying as I explained. My father listened silently to my story. But he seemed quietly angry. Then I told my father about something his mother said. At that moment, my father smirked. He took off his sunglasses and handed them to me. "We're going inside now. We'll make sure they regret hurting Emily." I made up my mind at my father's words. My love for Dan had cooled. All that was left was a desire for revenge. I've made up my mind too. We'll make Dan and his family regret this. After doing something, I put on my father's sunglasses. Then, together with my father, we entered Dan's family home. I stood before Dan and his family with my father. "We've kept you waiting." Standing resolutely with my father. Dan was dumbfounded to see me wearing sunglasses. "Why are you suddenly wearing sunglasses?" Dan looked at me and muttered. Initially, his mother smirked at me, but upon seeing my father beside me, she was stunned into silence. I realized that people really do freeze up from shock. She must have been planning to make more terrible comments upon my return. But unfortunately for her, I won't let things go her way. Instead, I plan to push her to the abyss. She probably already knows who my father is. Then, my father spoke to her. "I'm the father of the so-called slave." His voice was calm, but his eyes were not smiling. With my father's handsome face, his presence became even more intimidating. "Huh?" His mother, likely knowing my father's face, froze up dramatically. "Why? Why is Tim here? No, is this some kind of prank?" She uttered, visibly shaken. Her cheeks were slightly reddened. And there was a somewhat delighted air about her. Her eyes sparkled, almost like those of a young girl. Dan, not understanding the situation, remained stunned. Without answering his mother's question, my father just stared at Dan and his mother. His mother blushed under his gaze. It's embarrassing to see a grown woman act like this. I looked at his mother with a cold gaze. Then, Dan, regaining his composure, asked curiously, "Tim? Mom, do you know this person?" Dan probably doesn't know about my father. I'd guess he's quite well known among his mother's generation. But younger people might not know unless they watched dramas. Then, his mother glared sharply at Dan. "Dan! How can you say such disrespectful things? This man is Tim, a leading actor and my first love. Huh? Dan seemed incredulous. Then, his mother turned to my father with a smile and spoke. I'm a big fan of Tim. Look, this too. She quickly fetched her purse and showed it to my father. It's a keychain available exclusively to members. I've been a fan of Tim for over 20 years. His mother started to show off her fandom. Mom. Dan seemed appalled by his mother's sudden change. She continued to talk to my father, clearly thrilled to have her favorite actor in front of her. However, my father's gaze on his mother was stern. Finally, breaking his silence, my father spoke. I understand you're a fan of mine, but you were trying to treat my dear daughter Emily as a slave, weren't you? Huh? His mother's enthusiasm vanished, and she turned pale, visibly trembling. Ignoring his mother's panic, my father continued. And, without even meeting me, you assumed I was homeless? Quite a disrespectful assumption.